Hello, and welcome to Lesson 6, Lecture 3, our final lecture on editing. And in the first lecture, I talked about Raging Bull being one of the more famous examples of cinematic editing, especially for how Scorsese and editor Thelma Schoonmaker shaped the fights in the film. And Schoonmaker is one of cinema's great editors. She won a few different Academy Awards for Scorsese and worked with him for many decades, even up through some of his more recent films like The Aviator and The Departed. Okay, so in our first lecture, we talked about kinds of cuts, we defined editing, talked about the purpose and function of editing. In our second lecture, we looked at different kinds of shot relations, the different ways that shots are put together to help create narrative. And in this lecture, we're going to talk about continuity editing. Because graphics, rhythm, space, and time, all those relations that we looked at, are all at the service of continuity editing. And continuity editing is the most dominant style of editing throughout film history. So, between 1900 and 1910, as filmmakers started to use editing and as they started to innovate editing strategies, different kinds of editing, and marry the idea of editing to the idea of storytelling, they sought to arrange their shots so as to tell a story clearly and coherently. Thus, editing supported by specific strategy of cinematography and mise-en-scène was used to ensure narrative continuity. And at its most basic level, narrative continuity is simply a story that makes sense, right? That it unfolds from moment A to moment B to moment C, that it unfolds due to cause and effect, that we're not lost, right? And so powerful is a style that even today anyone working in narrative film is expected to be thoroughly familiar with it, of course, because continuity is by far the most common type of editing and storytelling and visual media. So as the name implies, the basic purpose of a continuity system is to allow space, time, and action to continue in a smooth flow over a series of shots. All the possibilities of editing we have already examined are turned to this end. Since the continuity style seeks to present a story chiefly through the handling of space and time, but editing furthers narrative continuity. And we talked about this in the last lecture. I gave you the example of the scene of somebody driving to the store in a movie, right? We're not going to see the entire uncut action of this person driving to the store. We're going to see him get in his car, turn it on, and then in the next shot, he pulls into the parking lot, and the next shot, he's inside the store, and so on. This is continuity, right? The story unfolds, the cuts are joined together to give us a sense of a relationship between space and time. So, a few specific elements of continuity. The establishing shot we already talked about, right? Usually taken from a distance, shows the spatial relations among the important figures, objects, and setting in the scene. So we might have a scene that opens on a shot of a castle, and then the next shot is some kind of moving medium shot of a carriage crossing a drawbridge, and then the next shot is of the carriage inside the courtyard, and then the next shot is of the characters in the carriage inside the castle, right? So the establishing shot, the series of shots, give us that relationship between space and time and show us what the characters are doing. Shot reverse shot two or more shots edited together that alternate characters, typically in a conversation situation. This is very, very common, especially in TV, right? And we'll look at examples of these in just a second here. And then an eyeline match. So let's look at some examples of those. In an eyeline match, the first shot shows a person looking off in one direction, and the second shot shows the nearby space, sometimes a faraway space, of what that person is looking at. So go ahead and watch the video, link to the lesson. Gives you a series of establishing shots in Ridley Scott's movie, Kingdom of Heaven. And just look at the way that he creates a sense of space, especially in this sort of, the journey movie, the epic movie, where there is so much space, where characters are traversing, vast expanses. Like, how are the establishing shots used to set up where they are and where they're going? And then an eyeline match, again, very simple. We've seen it many, many times, right? The first shot is of a character looking, and the next shot is of what the character is looking at. And that preserves continuity. We would be confused if we had a shot of a character looking at something, and then the next shot was of something that they weren't looking at. We wouldn't understand the visual relationship there, unless the filmmaker had already established that was how he was going to use shots earlier in the film. But in general, we would be confused. So an eyeline match is another way to ensure continuity. And you can look at these examples of eyeline matches here in this video. Shot, reverse shot. Talked about it already. You're familiar with it already. Shot 1, first character is talking. Shot 2, we see the other character, right? And then almost always we see parts of each character listening. That way we understand that it's a conversation, and we also understand how close they are to one another, right? Where they are in relation to another. However, there are different ways to do shot, reverse shot. The Coen brothers often do a shot, reverse shot where you don't see both characters in the same shot. So go ahead and watch the video of shot, reverse shots in Coen brothers films, linked to the lesson, to get an idea of how they do it. One more really important element of continuity editing, the axis of action. The continuity style, the space of a scene is constructed along what is variously called the axis of action, the center line, or the 180-degree line. The line ensures that relative positions in the frame remain consistent. Consistent eye lines, consistent screen direction. With a 180-degree system, the viewer should always know where the characters are in relation to each other in the setting. So again, it's a way of ensuring continuity and making sure that we understand where things are in relation to one another. So here's a very good video on the use of the axis of action, 180-degree video, because it's a little bit hard for me to explain it without you actually seeing it. But once you look at this video, you'll understand better what we're talking about. So just summing up, the purpose of continuity editing, which has been used in American movies, especially for, almost 100 years now, is dominant in Hollywood films. And the whole purpose of it is that it directs our attention, right? It's visual storytelling. Just the way that words direct our imagination on a page, visual cues direct our imagination as we watch the screen, it helps us to know what to look at because there is a lot of information in each shot. It also keeps things flowing, right? The idea is that continuity is so smooth that we're able to sort of get lost in the film, right, as it progresses. We're not jarred out of the storytelling by incoherent cuts or shots and cuts that call attention to themselves, right? So that's why continuity editing is used to emphasize dialogue, character reactions, and cause and effect, and create clear space and time to tell the story. We're not going to get too much into discontinuity editing, but just realize that there's always a way to break a rule. There's always an exception to the rule. There are always alternative kinds of art, right? It's not just the Hollywood style. It's not just continuity. There is discontinuity editing, in which the objective is not the continuous flow of the story, but rather to push the viewer out of their involvement with the story into a critical distance, into thinking about what they're watching and why the filmmaker is using different kinds of shots and cuts that we're used to. What's the point of that? One common, or I should say famous, it's not common because it's not used that often, but you will see it from time to time. One common element is the jump cut. The cut from one shot to the next jumps on screen, but it doesn't jump to a new shot. It jumps to the same shot. So basically what you have is a shot that's broken right in the middle. And that does jar us. We're like, whoa, we expect a cut to take us to the next shot. This one didn't. Why not? Now, why is the filmmaker presenting these shots this way? What is he or she trying to call attention to? So that's what discontinuity is. And then here's a famous jump cut example from the French film Breathless from the 1960s. And the filmmaker Godard was breaking Hollywood narrative continuity rules in order to innovate a different style of storytelling. After World War II in France, that wasn't just the same old Hollywood. He was trying to stretch the notion of what cinema could do. Okay, so that is the end of editing, and in our next lesson, we will talk about sound.